profile success stories. We'll start with Bharat Pathak. Practical बातें बहुत हो गई, अब practical बातें करते हैं, ठीक है? So we thought instead of giving gyan, let us profile 3 success stories, so that we can learn from their experiences. So it is in that context I'm happy to invite Bharat Pathak to join me here on the stage. Bharat Pathak. Bharat Pathak, for the few people who may not be aware of him, is of Wealth Managers Pune. And Wealth Managers Pune is the largest mutual fund distributor from Pune. Bharat has been an achiever all his life, starting from his school days. And in fact, he was a topper in his LLB. He was also a CA rank holder. He started his business in the mutual fund or the distribution or the financial advisory business in 1991. And he's looked upon as a role model for the IFA community in the entire country. So I'll have a conversation with him in which we will try and draw lessons from his experience. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Bharat Pathak. So, Bharat, you started your career as a chartered accountant. You were practicing with your father. So, what made you take up the advisory profession? Yeah, it's on.
It was a matter of liking.
Okay.
And instead of the conventional tax and audit practice which our firm had, I thought investments was a field where creativity will have little more chance.
Okay.
And of course, to some extent, 91 was a period when everybody was running to the equity field because of the lure of Harshad Mehta.
Okay.
So I think I also joined the crowd.
Okay. Okay. We are one of the most successful IFAs in the country. What do you attribute your success overall to?
I mean, thanks for calling me this, and I don't think that's necessarily right. But the success is not entirely mine. It's our team, my partner Ajit Khasnis, and there have been 3 or 4 core group members who have been with us for last more than 12 years.
Okay.
So I think the fact that all of us think in similar fashion, have typically same type of values, and like what Sumit was saying, trying to put clients' interest first. So that I think helps.
Okay. But tell me, one of the major challenges when people are trying to expand their business is to get the right kind of people and to retain them. And I'm told that you've done a terrific job in retaining the loyalty of your employees. What's the secret? Why are your employees so loyal to you?
Part of it is luck.
Okay.
And part of it is being open with them and trying to, everybody wants to progress in life. Everybody has his own agenda. So we came to a situation where we could at least openly discuss what they wanted. And gradually we have also tried to incorporate some kind of a profit share for the core employees. So I think that also, because merely paying a lip service and talking long term all the time is not going to help. Finally, in the short term, there are financial needs which need to be fulfilled. And the aspirations also to some extent have to be taken into account. So it may not be perfect, but we have been able to create some balance on that side.
Okay, so as far as I can gather, developing a team, motivating them with a combination of both material and psychological benefits is the key. What else would you hold your success to? Okay, tell me, how have you grown your business from 91?
It's been a series of accidents. So I started as a sub-broker in the Pune Stock Exchange in 91. And in 1994, with some of our friends, we formed a company which took up the membership on the National Stock Exchange. That was an emerging thing at that time. In this company, in 96, 97, we started, actually I started building the mutual fund business. And 96, 97 were early days for mutual funds. So in a way, it was a virgin field. The interest rates in those days were really very high. And I mean, you had companies like L&T, Grasim, Tata Steel paying 16, 17, 18% coupon on their bonds. With the combination of long-term capital gains, I think Birla Income Plus was one of the first schemes that we realized that with that, investors could get effectively 27, 28% effective pre-tax returns. The tax rates also, you'll remember, were quite high in those days. I mean, first they were 50%, then they came down to 40%. So high tax rates means the tax advantage gets amplified much more. So that, in a way, gave us the chance to go and talk to corporates. Also, what to some extent helped us consolidate our position was our analysis on Unit 64. So, I mean, we thought that the NAV and the price were at a great spread.
Yeah.
And corporate investors who, it was very common in those days for corporate investors to hold Unit 64 for the dividend yield. And we could go to many of them and show that there is a big difference between the NAV and the price. And this can lead to some kind of a problem. And we could get many of them to redeem out of Unit 64.
Okay.
So in a way, it was not selling new products, but possibly redemption of old products that helped.
No, but I would look at it as your ability to spot certain trends before other people. So your ability to ride on the high interest rate bandwagon, your ability to spot the fact that there could be trouble with US 64 and guide your clients accordingly is perhaps the key to your success.
Possibly, and possibly this was an ignored area for many people. So I'll not say that if 100 people are looking at that, I'll be able to spot it.
Yeah.
But if nobody is looking at that and I spot it, that works.
Okay, okay. Now, how do you keep getting additional business and more clients?
Actually, when we separated from the broking company in 2001, we had more than 2,000 client relationships. And over the next 3 years, we consciously went down from 2,000 to about 350. So what we decided is we have to look at a particular client profile which is suited to you, to your temperament, and also, like, again, I'll keep referring to Sumit because this was a very powerful presentation. He said that what is the per client revenue that you should be trying to get? And if there is a large, long list of clients where you are not getting that revenue, it is not making sense for you, it is not making sense for him. So we went from 2,000 to 350. We are reasonably clear on what kind of client profile we are looking at. And then over the next 3, 4, 5 years, that number of 350 has increased to about 700. Okay. So I think it is extremely important, I mean, as important to say that you should be client-centric, you have to ask the question, which client? The business model for each client profile is going to be different. Okay. And it has to be created in that fashion. So once that profile is clear and you are doing a reasonably okay job for them, growth typically happens through referrals. So I think that is what has helped.
Okay. So this is very interesting because from a client base of 2,000, you came down to 350, and now you've gone up to 700. So you feel a sharp focus on identifying what kind of clientele you want is important in any business.
I mean, I feel that is the first step.
Okay, okay. Yeah, because one of the things that I that puzzles me is when I meet IFAs and ask them, who are your clients? So I get the typical answer is, I have all sorts of clients. I have retail clients, I have HNI clients, I have MNI clients, I have salaried people, I have government bureaucrats, I have doctors, I have lawyers, I have people who live in Dubai, I have people who live in Mumbai, I have people who live in Chennai. And this is very surprising to me, because if an average IFA is so unfocused, you know, in any business, it is important for you to know who are you serving. Who are you serving? So I'm glad there's something
one more thing which we try to follow is try to look for clients who have more money but less time.
Okay, okay.
Because that helps.
How do you identify that? How do you identify that? I mean, I'm sure you have some instinct.
I mean, at the prospect qualification level, you will be able to know that if the guy has too much free time, then he's going to come and sit in your office and eat your time, which you actually owe to other clients.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good point, in fact. I like it. Okay. Now that you have 700 clients, I know you have a team of 20 people. How do you ensure that you maintain enough contact with your clients? You engage your clients enough. How do you do it?
I think main thing is a portfolio review process.
Okay.
So, which means that the client wants to know what is happening in his portfolio. And so somebody is looking at the portfolio, somebody is giving him the statements on a regular basis. And for different clients, different frequencies are set, at which the portfolios will be reviewed with them. Typically, a portfolio review meeting ends with collecting some check from the client, because clients keep on getting new money, and new money will be topped up. So a portfolio review meeting is also a sales meeting, but it has to be done in a low-key fashion.
Okay. But so your sale is being presented in the broader context of a review. So there is a necessity to buy or sell a certain product.
What we have also tried to follow is an asset allocation mandate for each of the accounts. So we have gone through an informal risk profiling situation, and the asset allocation. See, in a portfolio review, we look at we'll have to look at the equity market outlook. You'll have to look at the debt market outlook. You'll have to look at the performance of the existing portfolio, and if any course correction is required. So it doesn't mean selling a particular product. So if additional money has come in, that becomes a sale. If a change is required, irrespective of whether I am getting the revenue or not, I think that change being done proactively helps. And this reminds me of somebody asked a question that when you go to the TV shop, there are certain models that you have to choose from. The solution is not customized. When you go to buy a car, the solution is not customized. And in our business, the clients expect us to customize the solution. So I think internally we have come to realize that the business is not of selling standard products. Number of standard products are available. One has to look at it like a Lego or Meccano, that with these standard products, we have to choose and customize. So it's not as if we are building the product from scratch, but we are using standard components, building blocks, but giving something which the client wants or client needs.
Yeah, so you create customizing a portfolio based on some standard products.
No, I mean, you have 8,000 mutual fund schemes. And these are the standard components with clear benchmarks which are available. So what you choose is your issue, not what the fund wants you to sell.
One of the most gut-wrenching changes which have happened in the business have been the banning of entry loads. How has that affected your business, and how have you coped up with this challenge?
Actually, this happened step by step. If you really go back and see how this worked out. In January 2008, the first a change came about, which was allowing the direct channel. I mean, not the direct plan that we talk about today, but allowing the direct channel, which the investor could go directly and possibly save the entire entry load. So I think this was a wake-up signal for the distribution community, and we took it proactively. We went to a number of clients because instead of the client coming to know about it from the market, it's best that if his advisor transparently tells him that this kind of a thing is happening in the market. We also could convince many clients that, okay, you want to put some money under the direct route, you put it in the direct, you save the entry load, but later on you switch it under our code so that at least the trail will come to us and we'll be able to service you out of that trail. Secondly, like I told you, the business was essentially built up on as fixed income as the mainstay. And fixed income has always been no entry load and annualized type of thing. So in a way, we were brought up on annualized commission rather than upfront commission. So and 60–70% of the business came from fixed income.
Okay.
So it did not rock the boat. Even today, many funds, we have gone on a full trail model, even on the equity side. Even if we sell a close-ended fund, we request for a full trail model.
Oh,
yeah.
And have the AMCs agreed for it?
I mean, there's no reason why AMCs should not agree.
Okay.
We also have a selfish motive, in the sense, if the NAV goes up in future, our trail will go up.
Of course. Okay. Okay. Now, you said you built a substantially big fixed income book. Now, fixed income part of the business from HNIs and institutions has been affected a great deal by the introduction of direct plan.
Yes.
So how have you coped up in that particular, what impact has it had on your business?
Luckily, we haven't seen a big impact.
Okay.
I mean, it can happen. I mean, I'm not saying it's a foolproof thing. But also, what I find is if there is a relationship and if you are bringing some value to the table, the investor also wants you to be compensated in some way. So, also we hold a PMS license, and we are putting some of the clients with a fixed percentage fee in the fixed income side through the PMS route. So, under the PMS, we'll put the money in the direct plan. So the client clearly knows that we are not getting anything on that side, and a fee is negotiated which we can collect.
Okay, that's great. Now, what are your future plans, Bharat?
Future plans, actually more of the same.
Okay.
They say trying to know more and more about less and less. Hopefully one can come one day to a point where one knows everything about nothing.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I mean, jokes apart, I feel there is a big need for responsible distributors, and like Naren was saying, like Sumit was saying, what people want on large part of their portfolio are better than FD returns. So I think asset allocation process where no great adventure is required, but a predictable return is required. If one is able to cater to that, I think through referrals this business can grow. We are also looking at a succession plan, how it can be incorporated. It's too early in the day to talk about it. We are not ready with that. But these are some of the problems, and I don't think selling a business is the only answer. There have to be other answers to that, because I feel principally we are opposed to selling a business, because you are handing over your client relationships to somebody who is giving you some upfront money. So what he will do with those clients' portfolios? You can imagine, because he has a capital outlay which he must service. And if mis-selling starts happening, then you are in a way, the trust or reputation that you have built up with your existing clients, you have in a way encashed on that, in my way of thinking, at the cost of the client. So selling the business is not the only way. Things appear simpler when one of the family members joins the business. Then it is not seen as quote-unquote succession. It is a natural progression. But can we have a situation where unrelated professionals also join who come with a similar mindset, and this succession over a period of time can be put into place? Because finally, clients need continuity. Even within clients' families, new generation is going to come. And I think for us also, for the business, if a continuity can be created, that is a good thing. One will have to have an open mind about this, and one will have to share more with the next generation of non-related team members.
That's very bold thinking, because most of us, I'm also a business owner, grapple with this particular task, and admitting that you're willing to actually, you're open to the idea of people outside the family also eventually running and inheriting your business. It's a great idea. One of the things that you've done, you mentioned, was that you write for Sakal. You write for a newspaper, popular Marathi newspaper called Sakal in Pune.
Yeah.
Now, has that given you any leverage with your clients? Has that helped you expand your business?
Right. There are 2-3 types of activities. One is writing articles. Second is public lectures or participating in seminars. Third is running training programs or awareness programs. Now, this cannot be looked at as a there's no one-on-one correspondence with what you do and what you get. But you say that you keep giving something on that side, somehow it comes back to you. So I think there is a little soft and fuzzy approach to that. Like Nikhil, who is going to be one of the speakers here, he runs a TV show. It doesn't mean that people will ring him up and put money with him. But when he meets somebody, he has recognized that Nikhil is a successful advisor, and even he comes on TV. So similar thing happens when you write newspaper articles. So in a way, for that kind of space in the newspaper, normally you would have had to pay a lot of money. Here you are getting paid to advertise.
Great. Finally, what would be your words of advice to this group of IFAs here?
One thing, there is a great future for this business, for responsible distributors and advisors. Because this is a complex subject, it is not going to happen. I am going to contradict Sumit here. It is not going to happen the way Make My Trip works. Booking a ticket to Hyderabad and back is a simple decision. Buying or creating a mutual fund portfolio for your son's education, which is 10 years down the road, is a complex decision. Simple decisions can easily go on the net. For complex decisions, the need may not be realized. The principles on which the solution must be created is not known. And some kind of experience, if you can bring to the table, I think you are doing an invaluable service. So in the complex decisions, people need a sounding board. And if they look upon you as a sounding board, if there are these 200, 300 people who say that it may not be perfect, but some kind of a solution which someone else is applying his mind, somebody who is experienced. And I think so if we do it right, if we do it responsibly, if we do it in a client-centric fashion, performance also will not be a stumbling block every time. They say a doctor's job is to cure sometimes relieve often, but to comfort always. So I think that is our job as the client-facing person that we are.
Great. Thank you so much, Bharat. Thank you. Can I now invite Suresh Mehta to come here and give a token of appreciation to Bharat Bhai? Ravi. वो मेरे को वो पॉइंट हाँ ये स्लाइड उसका Okay, Bharat, thank you so much. And Bharat has to leave us now because he has to take a train to Pune immediately.